What are the biggest contributors to fructose, which we know does all sorts of damage to the body, which you just covered? What are the biggest sources, the top ones that people are consuming in their diet today that have a direct tie in to these eight quote unquote diseases that we covered earlier?
First thing you have to understand is that fructose consumption has gone up 25 fold, not 25%, 25 fold in the last 200 years. Our ancestors getting fruits and vegetables and the occasional honey, out of the ground or out of trees, consumed about 4 to 5 pounds of sugar per year. We now consume 94 pounds of sugar per year. So that's almost 25 fold. And a few years ago, before the obesity epidemic, hit, the grand stage, around 2010 to 2012, we were consuming up to 120 pounds of sugar per year. We've actually cut back to some extent, with diet sweeteners and, recognizing the problem. And as soda consumption has, started to fall. All right. So it's still a 25-fold increase. And the question is, can your liver handle that? Only your liver can metabolize fructose, because only your liver has the GLUT5 transporter, which is the fructose-specific transporter. So when you consume glucose, it goes to every cell in your body. When you consume fructose, it only goes to your liver. And the question is, what does your liver do with it? And the answer is, well, if you're consuming only a little bit, like an apple, you have the capacity, you have the capability of being able to metabolize that fructose load into ATP and not get yourself into trouble, because you won't have consumed so much that you're generating that liver fat. Okay, so an apple's okay. But now take that apple and turn it into a glass of apple juice. First of all, it's not one apple that makes a glass of apple juice. It's four. So you're getting the juice of four apples in that glass. So all of a sudden you went from one apple to four apples. Okay, you're not getting any of the fiber in order to reduce the rate of absorption and also to increase satiety, because the fiber moves the food through the intestine faster to get the satiety signals sooner. So now you are now you've got four apples in an 8-ounce glass of juice, and you are flooding your liver, and your liver is going to take all that fructose and it's going to turn it into fat. And now that fat is going to either be packaged as triglycerides, which are potentially drivers of obesity or cardiovascular disease, or the fat droplet won't make it out of the liver. It will precipitate in the liver, and now you've got fatty liver disease, which generates the insulin resistance, which then puts you at risk for type 2 diabetes and Alzheimer's. All right. So basically, heart disease and obesity on this side, fatty liver disease and Alzheimer's over here, all depending on what your liver will do with the fat it made from the sugar. So a little sugar is okay, because you have the innate capacity to metabolize a small amount. And that's the liver's job. The liver has enzymes in it that detoxify all sorts of things that you're exposed to. That's why Paracelsus famously said in 1537, the dose determines the poison, and nothing is without poison. It all depends on how much. Well, so we have, shall we say, toxins that will make you keel over and die at parts per billion, like cyanide, ricin, sarin, VX gas, right? And then we have chronic toxins that are, where we have a higher capacity, like arsenic, benzene, carbon tetrachloride, tobacco smoke, where, one, dose won't necessarily kill you, but, 10,000 might. All right. Well, fructose fits that same model. One sugar-laden meal is a treat. It's a delight. It's a feast. 10,000 sugar-laden meals is death. But that's what we're eating, because every meal is now a sugar-laden meal, because there's sugar in everything. 74% of all the items in the American grocery store have been spiked with added sugar by the food industry on purpose, because they know when they add it, you buy more. Because fructose, for lack of a better word, is addictive. This is their gravy train. This is their hook. Coca-Cola used to have cocaine in the process. It used to have alcohol in the recipe, and of course, it always had sugar and caffeine. So the FDA said, well, if you're going to sell it interstate, you got to get rid of the cocaine and you got to get rid of the alcohol. Well, it turned out the sugar and the caffeine was good enough to maintain the addiction. Well, that's what the rest of the food industry figured out too. So there we are. And that's why our food has been contaminated. Our entire food supply has been contaminated by the food industry, specifically for profit.
This all fits in this larger phrase that you have, which is protect the liver and feed the gut, right? Just to connect the dots for the folks that are listening, I'll expand you to deepen on the topic of gut, because you started in that direction earlier in the podcast, but I'd love to hear more about it. Is here you're talking about really protecting our liver for that onslaught of sugar, that fructose in particular, that fructose that is causing, in concentrated and frequent dosages, is causing all sorts of downstream effects that are happening.
That's right. So let me make it very clear to your audience, Drew. Okay, I am not fructocentric. Okay, some people think that's all I worry about. In fact, what I am is mitochondriocentric. That's my concern. Anything that causes mitochondrial dysfunction will lead to chronic metabolic disease. And it turns out there are 4 substrates in our food supply, all of which damage the mitochondria, all of which generate chronic metabolic disease. So there's fructose, which is the cheap one, and the one we give babies and fetuses for that matter. But there are the other 3 also. Branched chain amino acids, leucine, isoleucine, and valine, which are essential amino acids. They're 20% of muscle. But again, if you overwhelm your liver turns those into fat and generate fatty liver and insulin resistance and mitochondrial dysfunction too. Trans fats, which we already talked about, and they cause mitochondrial dysfunction. And finally, alcohol. So, what do these 4 substrates have in common? 1, there's no insulin rise. They don't generate an insulin response. Number 2, they all are metabolized by the liver and not anywhere else. And therefore, they overwhelm the liver. And number 3, they poison mitochondria. So, of those 4, sugar is the cheap one. Sugar is the addictive one, although alcohol is too. But sugar is the one we give to children and call it love. So I'm most worried about that one. But that doesn't mean that that's the only problem. As you can see, processed food is a problem all by itself because it is a mitochondrial toxin.